I integrate all of that tradition is
Oh, doctors. They said doctors.
Physical
Yeah.
exercises.
That's an explode.
both.
All right, so let's get started. So welcome those of you who opted for mindfulness instead of the Super Bowl. I appreciate you being here, making a small act of resistance to mainstream culture. Although, you know, it doesn't start until 6:30, so you can run and get to it after the end. So you can have your cake and eat it too. And my name is Daniel. I've been at the Center for Mindful Learning for about 20 months. And the reason that I was given this opportunity to teach is because I'm leaving the center in about 2 weeks, a week and a half. And so generally people are asked when they're leaving to give a kind of retrospective talk about what they learned during their time there, what it was like for them, you know, kind of share their story. I'm not going to do that because I'm actually still processing what it was like. I feel like the experience was so large that it's probably going to take many months, if not years, to kind of unpack it. And I actually think it's a little preemptive right now for me to give any definitive sense of what I learned when I was there. But you know, the experience, I'll just say, was definitely life-changing, and I'm sure something that I'll remember as one of the most significant experiences of my life. There's something really beautiful about being in a community completely dedicated to practice, and working with a teacher who's dedicating their life to making the world a better place. It's a really special experience. But this talk that I'm going to give, it's not about that. It's about a framework for practice that I've used for many years. It's not one that I learned at CML. It's one that I've used at CML. And it's has a lot to do with clarifying and cutting through our assumptions about practice, like what practice is for, why we practice, you know, sometimes even what we believe, but we don't say we believe about practice. And in that way, what we believe about reality, because the way that we relate to practice is often also the same way that we relate to our moment-to-moment experience. And so I took a lot of notes on my phone, so I'm not going to be like playing Candy Crush or something. I'm actually reading notes about this talk. So the way that this night will go is I'll talk about something for a little bit, then we'll practice, kind of put into practice some of the things that I talked about, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So the description of this evening was, what stories or assumptions do we hold about mindfulness practice? Is mindfulness about being with things as they are, maybe? Or maybe it's about going with the flow. You know, these are common ways that I hear people describe what this is all about. And so this week, or this evening, we'll practice challenging these notions and challenging our experience of reality while playing with different frameworks around practice. And so one thing is just to notice that, like, we're all coming here with different predispositions, different prior experiences, different views. And in that way, we're all having completely different experiences of Sunday Sit. We're having a completely different experience of hearing me. It might be that you're carrying a certain mind state that makes you agitated at the sound of my voice. Or you might be carrying a certain mind state that makes you really inclined to like believe what I'm saying, or something like that, right? And so each and every one of us is having their own Sunday Sit, this kind of phrase that we point at and say, the Sunday sit, but really there's, however many, 15, 16 Sunday sits happening right now, one for each of us. And so whatever attitude or views we hold, whether they're arising in the moment or something kind of structural like a belief, they profoundly color our life and the way that our practice unfolds. And so one of the gifts of practice for me has been that it's a kind of laboratory where I can intentionally question and challenge my experience of reality. And so, one kind of assumption about practice that I in particular want to challenge is that we practice in order to be with things as they are. There's like this idea that I'm just being with the breath, or I'm just being with sounds, or I'm just being with, body sensations. But, is this really so? Is it really the case that we can do that, in fact? And so that's one of the things I want to unpack throughout the rest of the talk. And so I have a couple of quotes that I want to share that I really like that are kind of about this. First quote is from a guy named Robert Anton Wilson. Does anybody know who that is? There's a couple of people. He was kind of like a 21st century American philosopher, very good friends with Timothy Leary. He says, every kind of ignorance in the world results from not realizing that our perceptions are gambles. We believe what we see, and then we believe our interpretation of it. We don't even know we're making an interpretation most of the time. We think this is reality. Another quote from a philosopher named Edmund Husserl. He says, all perception is a gamble. Another one, this time from Nagarjuna, who's a pretty well-known Buddhist saint in like the 2nd century. He says, wherever there's belief that things are real, desire and hatred spring up unendingly, and unwholesome views are entertained from which all disputes come. Indeed, this is the source of every view, and without it, no defilement can occur. Thus, when this is understood, all views and all afflictions vanish entirely. And the last quote is, yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man. That's from the dude from The Big Lebowski, well-known Dharma movie. And so there's this idea, right, in like mindfulness circles that we're just going to be with things as they are. We're going to follow the breath, just for a little while, drop the thought loops, and just be with things as they are. But there is no way things are, in fact. And that's what these quotes are trying to point to. That's what Nagarjuna is saying, is that even the breath that we experience is constructed, is dependent on the way we look at it. And of course, we have this experience all the time. Sometimes the breath is lovely and light, and sometimes the breath is struggling to get out, or sometimes the breath is long and slow. And of course, sometimes that depends on physiological factors, but it's also depends on how we look at it, how we relate to it. Another example, sometimes we feel that we're contracted, and sometimes we feel that we're expanded, like myself, like I feel contracted. And then other times we feel like, oh, I'm wide open, I'm expanded. And so the self even is constantly changing, and we might ask, like, which self is real? And I think that these quotes are pointing to a different question. That it's not that one is real or one is better or one is less real. It's that things are flexible, that the dependent nature of things implies a kind of like malleability. And I'll keep talking about this in different ways. It's just kind of like, it's hard to talk about this linearly, I think, at least it is for me. And so I'll just kind of talk at it in a couple of different ways. And so when we practice, often we notice things like things are changing, right? Like we'll have some emotion come up and then some other emotion will come up. And then, we'll be distracted by an itch on our arm. And then that itch will disappear. And so we can notice on one level, yeah, things are definitely changing. And that's really useful to see, like things are changing. But it's not just that they're changing, but also why are they changing? You know, why is it that our perceptions arise or pass away? Why do they disappear and then appear? Like, what is it? And so mindfulness in this way can be a practice of like examining that process, really looking at like when I relate in a particular way to my experience, certain things happen, certain things fade away. And in particular, when it comes to the practice of mindfulness, you know, when I, for instance, relax my body, things can start to fade. Or when I let go, things become less solid. Has anybody noticed that? That like things appear really solid and then I relax and all of a sudden it's not so solid anymore.
Letting up on your grip.
Yeah, there's something that's being kind of released, and that thing that's being released isn't the thing, it isn't the thing, it's something else in the equation, right? It's something that we're letting go of, and then the objects fade because the objects themselves are dependent on it, right? And so this is all to say that, you know, our experience is not a certain way. We actively conjure it, we actively fabricate it, we actively construct it moment to moment in certain ways, but we don't know that we do it. And so that's delusion, right? Is that we make ourselves suffer, forget that we're making ourselves do that, and then we don't know how to get out of it. And so one really great analogy for this is like, it's like, have you know, like shadow puppets? So like, if I were to, I don't even know how to do this, but if I were to like make like a wolf on the wall, right? And then we would all react and be like, oh my God, there's a terrifying wolf on the wall, right? And so from the perspective of being with things as they are, you might say, well, I'm just gonna be with that wolf. And I'm gonna be with my fear of that wolf. And I'm just gonna let it be. I'm just gonna, you know, allow it to be there and not fight with it. But what you're not seeing is at the same time, you're holding your hand. You are making that wolf, right? That wolf is being constructed by you. And so this, and so again, like Nagarjuna said, the suffering is dependent on believing things are real. So in this case, we believe the wolf is real, right? Not seeing that it's just an arbitrary construction. If you just let your hand go, it wouldn't be there anymore. You wouldn't have to be with the wolf because the wolf would have disappeared. It would no longer be there. And so then it brings us back to this question: how is it that this experience arises? How is it that it disappears or fades? And so when we get to a point in our practice, and this happens to me all the time at deeper and deeper levels, where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm with the breath. I'm with things as they are right now. That, for me now, is a red flag saying you are encountering your tendency to make real experience. And this is your opportunity to go deeper and to push past that boundary, to see again that this thing that you thought was real is something that you're in some ways imagining into being, or constructing yourself, like you're making it really. And you know, this is from the very, very gross, like kind of constructed level, to very, very impossibly subtle levels. And so, you know, something that we can all relate to is like when an issue comes up for you, or like when you get triggered, right? You can notice that this trigger, this issue, this thing, maybe it's like a thought and a body sensation, get really, really big in your experience. And the other thing that gets really big is your sense of self. Like your sense of self expands almost with the issue. Together with the issue, they expand. And then, you know, later on, if you follow your breath, you stop paying attention to it, you stop feeding that perception, all of a sudden it starts to kind of dematerialize until it's completely gone, right? So on a very gross level, we see that very clearly. But that can happen more and more subtly. You know, you can start paying very close attention to sounds and start seeing how they are, you know, sound is a waveform, right? And so you kind of puncture that solidity. And then you listen to the waveforms even more, and it's kind of like almost like a staccato thing. And so you puncture that solidity. And then you kind of listen to it even more, and there's more space than you thought there was. And on and on and on and on, right? So it happens on very overt big levels and very small levels. And so the reason why this idea that being with things as they are, and I keep harping on it, but is such I think a dangerous idea, is because if we don't explicitly challenge the solidity of experience or appearances, we will almost certainly fall back into sort of a naive realism that what is happening is real. Because that's the tendency of the human mind, is just to believe that whatever is happening to me right now is real. You know, that's why we have to practice. If that wasn't the case, then we'd all be like liberated, you know, because as Nagarjuna said, like all suffering is because we don't see, or we think that things are real. We believe things to be real. And so practice then, for me, with this framework, becomes an opportunity to puncture that belief in the reality of things, to challenge that assumption that this experience that's arising now is somehow independent of me and arising as it is, instead of something that I can actually, you know, that I'm creating, actively creating with the way that I'm relating to it. And so one of my favorite, there's a great sutta called the Kala Karama Sutta, and the Buddha has like a short poem about the nature of kind of experience and what it's like. He says that form, i.e. like the body, is like a mass of foam, and feeling is but an airy bubble. Perception, seeing, is like a mirage. It's just like it's there and then it's not, you know, if you look at it in a certain way. And formations, that's like moods and mind states and patterns. It's like a plantain tree. And this might not make, like, so plantain, the bark of a plantain tree, you can just keep peeling, and then you can just keep peeling and there's nothing there. So like that's how like moods and mind states are. And then this is my favorite, consciousness is like a magic show, a juggler's trick entirely, right? Even consciousness is just like this thing that we build through ignorance. And so for me, this is also really helpful because it gives a better definition of delusion, which I never really kind of understood for a long time. What is delusion, right? And so we can understand actually that delusion is simply this naive realism. It's just this human tendency to make things real, to call things real. And we have a natural kind of compulsion towards this reifying of experience. But on this compulsion stands suffering. All the suffering, according to Nagarjuna. All of our suffering rests on this kind of just desire to have things be real, or this belief that things are real. So, all that being said, what time is it? All that being said, you know, what's another way that we might practice, right? Instead of just trying to be with things as they are. So, like I said before, practice, instead of just noticing that things change, you can ask the question, why do things change? Why, you know, you can notice that things fade away. You can also ask the question, why does this thing fade away? Why does this thought that I was having, this thought loop, all of a sudden, you know, just disappear? You know, yeah, you went back to your breath, but like, what changed in the kind of, you might say, like, chemical reactions in your mind? Like, what did you remove? What is no longer there that was there that enabled that thought to flourish and take root and proliferate? And so that's a kind of a different orientation, where you're not just having meditative experiences, but instead kind of being curious about almost the physics of the experience. Like, how is it that these things happen? Why is it that thoughts fade? Why is it that body sensations go from solid to vibratory. What is going on there? What am I doing? What action am I taking that changes my experience like this? And so in this way, different meditative techniques become almost like ways of looking, right? Ways of looking that might give us different insights into how we create experience, how we construct experience moment to moment. One lens that we could take is just bare attention, is what we typically assume to be mindfulness, right? Just be with your body sensations. That's a certain lens that's very useful, right? Like when you are just with your body sensations, for example, you construct less. You typically build less, and therefore you suffer less because there's less clinging, there's less attachment to your experience. So less is being built. But that's not the end, right? You can push the envelope further. And that's why I think that this way of looking at meditation as lenses that you can look at your experience through is quite useful. And so it might be clear to those of you who are kind of from a Buddhist-y background that I'm sort of talking around the concept of emptiness, right? This is what the Buddhists kind of refer to as emptiness, is this understanding that the world and all the phenomena in it, including ourselves, arises dependently upon something else. And the thing that it arises dependently upon is clinging, right? Is attachment, or in Shinzen system, I guess it would be like resistance or lack of equanimity. Is that right, Danny?
You could say that.
Yeah, okay. I'm not so familiar with Shinzen system. Okay, cool. So we're gonna play with this now, right? So I just said a lot of stuff that might have felt pretty abstract, depending on if you've had any kind of experience, particularly with things fading. That's what made it very clear to me that this was a real thing. But we're gonna play with this. And so we're gonna go through a set of techniques pretty quickly that are different ways of looking. And so there's gonna be 4 techniques that I'm gonna offer to you. 3 of which are based on the 3 characteristics of Buddhism, which for those of you who aren't familiar, it's the first characteristic is impermanence. It's like the changing nature of things, like everything changes, nothing lasts. The second is dukkha, or suffering, or unsatisfactoriness. And the last is anatta, or not self. That there's no essential nature. Everything is just sort of arising spontaneously. To put it very simply, but each of these characteristics has associated with it a certain technique, and so we'll kind of play with that. And I'll remind you to do this as we go, but just notice as we do this practice what sort of like invoking these different ways of looking does to your experience. Just notice, and particularly notice like the solidity of objects and the presence or absence of like clinging or resistance or tension, which you can feel in the body or in relationship to different aspects of your experience. So if you'd like to straighten up and settle in. And so to begin, practice with what we might know as mindfulness. That is just bare attention. And for the object, if you'd like, you can use the breath, wherever it's most available to you. And so the objective here is simply to be with the breath as clearly and consistently as possible. To have a full experience of the breath, just as it's presenting itself to you. And when your mind drifts away, simply return to the breath. And something that can be quite helpful to notice is if there's any feeling of release or relaxation as you come back to the breath from whatever was distracting you. You can feel that relaxation in the body, that release of clinging, that release of fabrication, of building. You might also notice if your attention gets captured by a string or a loop of thoughts. What happens to your sense of self? Can you notice how that's built by the thought, with the thought, or with the emotion, side by side? And then again, returning to the breath and feeling the release. And really notice the difference between building the world with your mind and just being with the breath. The relief that comes with just being present. Versus the tension of building and fabricating. And so now we'll shift to a different way of looking. Impermanence. So keeping your attention on the breath. See if you can notice the changing nature of the breath. Notice on whatever level you can how inconstant it is, how unstable it is. The sensations are constantly moving, fluxing. And if you like, you can pay attention to other body sensations. Choosing to pay attention to places where you notice change, notice fluxing, notice impermanence. You might notice vibrations or pulsing. or if you notice a solid sensation, you might turn to look at that and see if, by paying close attention to it, it too starts to show its impermanence. Exploring your experience, its changing nature, constantly changing, constantly changing. Notice how it is to look at experience this way. Is there more space, less suffering, less clinging, less solidity? And if you build yourself a world, don't take it personally. That's just what consciousness does. And again, notice change. Notice fluxing. Notice vibrations. Notice pulsing. And if it helps, you can use a simple label like changing, 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 changing. As you notice change, it's a verse that helps. You can see this fleeting world like a drop of dew or like a star at dawn. a bubble in a stream. A flash of lightning in a summer cloud. A flickering lamp. A phantom. A dream. Changing. Changing. Now, put down that way of looking. And for a moment, just be with your breath as it is, as it occurs naturally, not trying to notice its changing nature. Now we'll pick up the lens of dukkha, of suffering. And to do this, just use a simple note label, allowing or opening, knowing that to the degree that we resist experience, that is to the degree to which we will suffer in this moment. So noticing if you're just open to this experience, welcome this experience, the suffering can just evaporate, drain out, be released. So again, you can do this with the breath, or shift to other sensations in the body, or let your attention go where it wants. But wherever you find yourself, just open, welcome, allow, allowing. whatever experience arises, opening, allowing. If resistance arises, opening and allowing. If love arises, opening and allowing. Just open. Just allowing. Feel in the body how it feels to allow, how it feels to open. And notice in the body how it feels to cling, to push away, or to pull towards. Notice what it's like to open, to allow. Allowing, allowing. Okay. Whatever experience, opening. Now, putting down that way of seeing, just be with the breath as it is, as it appears to you. Noticing how your experience might have been affected by that exercise. Now, for the last way of looking, we'll play with not self. So, you can pick any part of your experience. Body sensations are a good choice. And notice how these sensations are just happening, coming and going on their own. It might seem like they're floating in space. Just moving on their own accord, spontaneously arising, spontaneously passing away. As the Buddha said, to regard all experience, this is not me, this is not myself, this is not what I am, this is not mine, which you can shorten to not mine, not me, or just happening, just happening. Noticing how wherever you look, it's just happening. Don't need to do anything. It's just happening. The breath just happening. Sensation in your leg, it's just happening. Sounds, just happening. It's not you, not me. Thoughts just arise and disappear on their own. Just happening. In this way, letting go. Letting go. It's not you. Just happening. Noticing again what it feels like to regard experience in this way, to see experience in this way. It's just happening. It's not me, not mine. To unhook our identification with it. It's all out of control. Just happening. If identification arises, it's a great opportunity. That too is just happening. That too is not you, not me. Just happening. Cool, so if folks want to kind of stand up and stretch a bit, I was thinking we could talk about what that was like and then practice a bit more, perhaps with whatever our favorite one of them was. So, thanks for tolerating that. So how was that for folks? Does anybody want to share? Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
I really like the idea of having each of the three characteristics, like really trying to make a technique out of them. I'm curious about why you emphasized allowing with dukkha or suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, suffering, from one perspective, suffering happens when we resist experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so the opposite of resistance is allowing, welcoming, and opening to. And so you, through that lens, start to really tease apart that relationship and see, like, when I resist, then I suffer. When I open and allow, suffering dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a way to kind of really target that specific understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other ways, there are multiple practices associated with each of the characteristics. I just picked those because those are my favorites. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Could you mention a few other ways that you could kind of try and play with each of them?
Each of the characteristics.
Mhm.
Yeah. So for impermanence, you can notice it at different scales,
Mhm.
right? You can notice it like throughout your day. Like I was feeling this way, now I'm feeling that way, now I'm feeling this way. You can really target and zone in on vibrations. That's like what they do in the going to practice is they really try to get you to the point where you can see vibrations and then just kind of like go for it.
Mm-hmm.
With anatta, I don't actually, that might be the only one for that one. It's kind of basically just releasing identification with whatever phenomena is arising.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty, I mean, it's probably the most subtle of the three, but it's also the most kind of one-dimensional,
Mm-hmm.
you know? You're just releasing identification.
Mm-hmm.
With the suffering one, you can focus on just releasing tension in the body, because typically tension is an indication of clinging.
Mm-hmm.
And so that you can use that as a kind of window to examine clinging and the relationship between clinging and suffering. That's a good one too.
Yeah, I just asked because the way I'd kind of come at suffering before was like noticing, like this is really easy for me to do right after waking up, just noticing how like kind of obnoxious and frustrating so many aspects of experience are. Like, there's pain in my body, all these thoughts are happening, I'm confused, it's dark,
Yeah.
But when I tune in, I can kind of tune into that anytime, like, oh, there's an itch, or, I'm thinking about something that's not here right now, or,
Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
What did you say the vibration was connected to a characteristic?
Impermanence. Yeah, so it's just noticing that things change, and that can be seen at a lot of different levels, right? So, if I'm moving my hand like this, like that.
So the vibration would be what changes, the vibration?
Yeah, exactly. So,
So,
yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I just really appreciated this meditation. It's beautiful, and I had a lot in my head all day long, and I was like thinking, gee, how today I could just, I don't know, it'd be nice to have a technique. I mean, there's lots of techniques, of course, but technique that really targets reality. That she came up with that today, so I was like, thank you. And then I had a stomach ache, and then just stay with that, allowing it to dissolve. But I think also your voice and the way you're saying it's just changing. Just that label is really soothing, and allowing was just the right word for me. It's just like, yeah, there it is, there it is. And then just got into that less solid, more vibrational. It's just the whole progression is really nice. Like right deeper and deeper and easier and easier. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Did you
I
have
hope this is recorded.
I think so.
I mean, you're talking so low, I hope it actually comes out on the recording.
Oh, yeah.
It's something I'd love to hear again and again.
Did you have a favorite of the three, by any chance?
Allowing was a pivotal point in that. I mean, I could see it moving in that direction, but the allowing was like, yes,
Nice.
yes. Whatever it is, just yes.
Thank you for sharing.
But I think your voice was helpful in the yes. I just think it was nice to have that, not just be my voice, like radical acceptance, or it's just a really nice, somebody else, cheerleader in my head. It's nice. Yeah, very hypnotic.
Nice. Yeah, I think guided meditation is often border on hypnosis.
It does. That's part of, reality.
So I would find it helpful if your voice was louder,
Oh,
but it was harder to hear. Even though it was calming, it was also strange to hear everything that you're saying. So I just let it go.
Perfect.
I didn't worry about it, but if you wanted me to really hear the words, you might just have to.
Cool.
Can you say more about what you mentioned, the connection between tension and clinging? Is that like physical tension is often connected to mental
Yes.
clinging?
Yeah, typically, not always, but typically, if we're tense in the body, that means there's some kind of corresponding tension in the mind. Not always, but often. It's usually like, it's kind of like, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire kind of thing. Usually. Not always, but usually. That's a good indicator. It's really helpful. And that's why often I think in mindfulness practice, they say like, relax the body, because that's another window way into release clinging, which as far as I can tell, almost all meditative practices are in the end about letting go of what? Letting go of clinging. Because that's with what we construct our world. So there's lots of different avenues in it. And I think, you know, the reason I asked you if you had a favorite is because we'll do another practice session. And I would ask that each person just pick the practice that they most enjoyed. The one that felt like it offered them the most spaciousness and freedom and openness or whatever, or that they just felt drawn to. And then we'll do that one. You'll just do that. Because my experience is that we each kind of feel drawn to a certain one, and that often, you know, my experience is often that means like there's a kind of an insight or an understanding we're being drawn to with that practice. And so if we just practice that practice, often we'll be like, it'll do something really nice for us. And so maybe for you, that's just relaxing tension in the body, if that feels like alive for you. And just go for that. Yeah.
One of the things, when you said clinging, that really spoke to me. I never heard the word, well, I haven't. Anyway, it spoke to me. It was a really good word for me to hear. And the entire talk was really outstanding, but I can't remember what you said right now. But the thing that one of the experiences I had was when, in the third exercise that we had was not be the body. I've never, like, they say follow the breath, but then all of a sudden I was like, well, am I following the breath or am I following the beat of my lungs? Like, it's like all of a sudden, all that I experienced was this beat of my lungs, which I've never noticed before. And then, with the not me, it was just happening on its own. And then I kind of freaked me out a little bit. And then I realized that was kind of clinging. So I needed to let go of that clinging to being freaked out. The lungs beating with, automatically without me even being connected to the lungs. And, that's my experience.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. That's really, yeah.
But it was really weird to think about, like, when you say follow the breath, I don't know, maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal to anybody, but it got really confusing to me where I was following the breath or following my lungs, where they intertwine so much that really, anyway, if you thought any thoughts about that.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing is I think that when we pay really close attention, often we start to see that the thing we're looking at doesn't really exist. And so when you follow the breath closely enough, all of a sudden you see, like, where is the breath? Where is that thing that I was referring to as the breath? Yeah, what am I following here? And then, that's a great, that's a great insight, right? That I was looking at it in a certain way, and then it changed. It no longer is appearing in the same way because the clinging isn't there. pass or something changed. Then the other thing I'd say is that my experience with these practices is often that when I let go enough, fear arises because we don't, there's a deeply, I think, evolved tendency to want to hang on and to make things real. Like it's a very deep in our bones, in our body, in our heart, in our like viscera, that if we don't hold on, then we'll be probably like, killed by a lion or something. And so it's really good to then apply the technique to that fear. So you did exactly the right thing. But also just know that it's totally natural and it's actually a sign that it's working. Like I remember, I think it was Jack Kornfield said that like when he notices fear, he's like, that's like a light that says like time to grow, turning on in his practice. So it's wonderful. That was the experience. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
I just want to mention one thing you did use a label happening.
Mhm.
I like that. I have my own label to refer to on not me, but I've never been able to. Well, I not really try, but if someone were to ask me what I'm doing, and I was trying to explain it, I don't know that I could. But if you were using the label happening, then I think they would have that experience without having to go down the labyrinth of trying to explain it.
Yeah.
And it's just so simple.
Yeah, that label really works for me too.
You're passive and it's just all happening.
Yeah.
So thoughts are happening, so sensations happen, so it's just a nice way. It makes it all less, you're really more passive than the subject.
Yeah. Yeah, using labels is really powerful. I think so often we just say like, often we just say like, see, hear, feel, which again is like that bare mindfulness, right? Just trying to pay bare attention. But we can also use labels to kind of, in a different way, to kind of help us see experience in a certain way. And so language is so powerful for us.
It is.
And so I think it's really something that we can use wisely in our practice in that way.
Having studied language and how it affects people's thinking, whenever you say hearing, feeling, you're implying an I. When you're saying happening, it's just you're not anymore the I. I'm happening. No, doesn't really come to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It puts you in a different role, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, we should definitely be careful the way that we use labels in that one.
I found it helpful.
Anybody else? Anything they want to share or say before we take another dose of practice? Great. So for this next round, I'm going to do a lot less guidance. And what I'd ask is that you just choose whichever practice felt the most appealing to you. That could be like an intuitive draw, like, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to just kind of explore that more. It could be because you felt more release with that practice. And to remind you again that the three practices were, noticing impermanence, allowing experience, or releasing identification with experience by saying it's just happening. And so, or if you like, you can just do the bare attention. But I would recommend experimenting with one of those three. So, anybody not have a favorite?
You want to just assign me one?
Yeah, definitely. I'm feeling the allowing. Yeah.
Combining. Like I really like the happening and the impermanence. You notice it's happening and it's changing.
Totally. Yeah.
That's what was the most powerful.
Yeah, if that's available for you, then go for it. The nice thing about separating them is that they do give you different kind of windows into experience. Like you notice different facets. So, I would kind of recommend just doing one for a little bit and then doing the other one. But if you want to try combining them, you're not going to break your brain. Yeah, all right. So again, just have the attitude of like, this is a laboratory, right? And no matter what technique you're doing, try to notice the effect it has on the solidity of the objects in your experience, whatever that object is. And notice the presence or absence of resistance or kind of fabricating and how that feels. Like, does that feel good? Really important to notice that if that does feel good, because that's how that's how our bodies learn to do this naturally. If we fail to notice that, then we can have all kinds of experiences, but it won't kind of get into our bones. So again, notice that movement, that kind of underlying reality of how clinging affects our experience. So practice for 20 so minutes, 24 minutes. So we can talk about how that was for anybody, if who wants to share a report, or if there are any questions about whatever one of the 3 techniques, or about the talk, or whatever.
I decided I like the impermanence one better. I tried both of them.
Nice.
I found with happening, I kind of, happening, and then the experience would kind of dissipate. And so I oh, I need to find a new thing that's happening. I would kind of like bounce around to different things that were happening.
Oh, interesting.
But with the looking at how things are changing, I found I went deeper into what was happening. Because for me, I felt like I was more curious, like, oh, how is this changing? How is that? You know, there it goes, and it brought up feelings of my own impermanence and going into that feeling, and yeah, I found that was really nice for me. Very, yeah, expansive and letting go in lots of different ways.
And when you said that you were trying this is happening when the experience dissipated, like you mean the thing you're paying attention to like disappeared, or?
Yeah, if it was a sensation in my body, it would kind of, that label for me, it tended to, it was kind of a checking, oh, that's happening, and then either my attention to it would dissipate, or the actual, like, if it was a feeling in my body, it would kind of
Disappear.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
that's gold right there, actually. I mean, and so, and it's cool that, or it's great that you then went to a different technique, but that is also a very useful thing to see, right? So you paid attention in a particular way, and then the thing that you were paying attention to disappeared. That's huge.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Like those different techniques, they did very different things in my experience.
Yeah. Cool. So now you have two kind of ways of looking. And they're different. They're useful in different ways. And I think for me, like I've been practicing these 3 ways for a while, and I use them at different points, and I kind of like try them on a certain experience, and then like doesn't work or makes me suffer more, and then I try a different one, and it kind of like deflates, and I feel good. So thank you for sharing. It's cool.
So is that different from the way when you use those techniques? You find that
I find for me the third one, this is just happening, has the tendency to just make things disappear. Like I do that, and like emotions fade and thoughts fade and body sensations fade very quickly. And at least how I learn this stuff, certain people have certain like natural gifts when it comes to certain one of the 3 or 2 of the 3. They just tend to work really well in terms of releasing clinging, essentially. And so yeah, that what you said about like the objects would just disappear, that's totally my experience too. And it freaked me out the first couple of times. I was like, I can't pay attention to anything. Everything's just disappearing. Like, I can't. And I was like, this is a problem. I can't pay attention to anything. And then I was like, oh wait, actually this is great. There's nothing bothering me anymore.
So maybe it wasn't the technique, maybe it was just my perception of, oh, I need to find a new thing, or new things keep coming up, happening. That was more what my brain does.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it could be like things were disappearing, and so your mind was like, uh-oh, like let's do this other technique that at least gives me some sense that like there's something that exists. It's changing really fast, but at least it exists, and I can kind of pay attention to it. And so I'm not saying that is what happened, but it could have been. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just good to notice, like, 1, how things do disappear, and then 2, how deeply our mind wants things to exist and wants something to pay attention to, which is a big insight, very important.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, having a thing that I'm paying attention to, I liked it because I like the experience of having stable attention on the one thing, and I guess continuing with that one object of my attention, that was, yeah, and that was also, I don't know how to explain that, but it was an experience of, that I perceived of, letting go of whatever was not that object of attention. So,
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and concentration, you have to let go of everything else in order to concentrate. So there's no right way to do this, really. It's just good to notice, or it's just good to play, really. And learn what you can from every technique and change it when you want to. And I mean, that's certainly how I like to do it, is just play with it, see what happens, and change it up.
When you were just saying about, one thing about he was disappearing.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden that, I kind of related to what I was experiencing, and then I got to, there was a lot of freak out in this last exercise, but in the end, I was like, well, what's left? Is there anything left? And I guess I want to, that's kind of seems like a kind of a ridiculous question, but it's kind of what I'm left with, well, what's left? Is there an energy that is just existence is, what is existence then? It's is it just the experience? Or the energy that you experience? That is me, there's no me, but what is this? What is this?
Yeah, good question. I have no idea.
Yeah, I want to answer
Yeah, sorry you come, you can ask him that. I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, that sounds great though. I mean, the fact that question would arise is pretty cool. That's pretty cool. But maybe somebody else has an opinion that,
Can you watch the nothing happening?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Nothing's happening.
without commenting on what is existence, because I don't really, I think I don't want to touch that. But the idea of getting to the point where there's nothing, in your direct experience, where it feels like there's nothing going on. Is that what you're kind of saying? That was what was happening?
Well,
or everything was kind of faded, or?
I can't even explain it. It's just like you said about the disappearing thing. It's like, that's not, kind of, it's like the clinging. I was doing the activity thing. And then all that I experienced directly was experience itself. And sort of an energy, a very intense kind of expansive energy. And that seemed to be, okay, well, what happens if I let go of the expansive energy?
Exactly. Yeah.
But the experience is still left, right? I mean, the experience, if there's no experience, there's no experiencer, right? I mean,
we should find out. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the right direction. I think that often, in many traditions and for many people, they get to a certain point in when things are disappearing, and all of a sudden they want to reify that. They want to make that experience real. They're like, oh, everything is really spacious and filled with love and peace. That's real. I'm gonna stick here. That was good. I'm glad I got to this real place, and now I'm good. And so the opportunity is to then see that too is not me, or that too, I can let go of, essentially, and move on and keep going. But that's Buddhism. They kind of want to get you all the way past anything that you think is real. And as Nagarjuna said in that quote that I said, that anything you think is real will be a source of suffering. So even if it's spaciousness, love, and peace, or just this expansive energy, fundamentally, on some level, that will be a source of suffering. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't like hang out there for a long time and like really like soak it in and appreciate it and allow it to inform how you move in the world. Like, so there's a balance between like just transcend, and like letting the heart be softened by whatever the beautiful experience that's arising for you now. You know, and I think that you can be a good judge of which is which to do, when to do which. You know, but that's my opinion. I don't think you should just cut through it necessarily right away. If it's beautiful, and if the heart feels moved by it, then be moved. Yeah. But, is that helpful?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Cool.
Sorry.
What time is it? 10 good. Oh, 6:56. We end at 6:55. Okay, so we're 1 minute later.
So Pan has some responsibility opportunities for us to put this sense of impermanence, emptiness, compassion, whatever arose for you, into action, into positive change in the world. And so he'll read a few things, and if you have any that you know about, feel free to share after he shares those.
Yeah, I'd like to share a couple opportunities